Welcome back once again to the Imaginary Gallery. This is Hero, and I am TJ, your host. Tonight we'll be discussing creating an abuse-free world, and this is my baby. He's huge. Referencing Lundy Bancroft's book, Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. We're in the discussion of someone who's dealing with a person who's been abused. And the next section in the book is called Remembering the Children. Lundy Bancroft says, among the screaming and the insults, behind the barrage of accusations and counter-accusations, lost in our panic as we see a lady being repeatedly psychologically hammered or physically beaten, we can forget that the abusive person has other victims too. The children can become invisible. The police who come in on a domestic abuse call sometimes have been known to forget to even ask if there's any child in the household or not. These children recede into the corners. They try to keep themselves safe, and they may remain unnoticed until they're old enough to try to jump in and protect the mothers. As is true with almost every approach to abuse, we have to start out by breaking the silence. He suggests that you ask the mother in private how she feels her children are being affected by this abusive man's behavior and by the tension it creates. Does he abuse her in front of the kids? How do they react if he does? What are her concerns about them? What does she think that they need? And remember, you're supposed to think with her, not for her. Break secrecy with children as well. Tell them that you are aware of what's going on and that you care about their feelings, and you can ask these questions. How are things going at home for you? Is it hard for you when your parents are arguing? What happens when they get mad at each other? Does anybody at your house ever hurt anyone else's feelings or frighten anyone? Would you like to tell me about this? Even if the child answers no to all these questions, you've demonstrated that he or she matters to you and that you understand that the abuse, without calling it that, can be painful, hurtful, or frightening. Then leave the door open to future communication by saying, you can tell me about your life at home anytime that you want to. It's okay to talk about it. Children can get upset sometimes when the parents argue. Notice that Bancroft recommended using soft terms that neither name abuse nor assign any kind of responsibility for it until you find out how much the child actually knows. This language is very important to avoid alerting children to painful dynamics of which they may not be aware. This guideline should be reversed, however, if the child does disclose abuse directly to you, or if you know that this child has directly witnessed explicit verbal or physical abuse towards the mother. Then it becomes important not to use neutral terms, because the kids of abused ladies already feel that they themselves and their mothers are at least partially at fault, and you do not want to reinforce those hurtful misconceptions. So once the secret's out, avoid even-handed language such as the problem between your parents or the mean things they sometimes do to each other. Children do need to hear the following messages. It's not your fault if somebody in the family says mean things or hurts somebody else. It's not your mother's fault if someone treats her horribly. No one should ever blame you for being mean to you or hurting you. A child can't really protect his or her mother, and it isn't the child's job. The term abuse doesn't mean anything to children younger than 10 or 12, but may be useful in speaking if it's a teenager. In general, descriptions work better than labels. If the abuser is the children's father or father figure, take particular caution not to speak terribly of him as a person, but only to name and criticize the actions that it perpetrates. Kids do not want to hear that their dad is a mean, selfish, or evil person. In cases where the abuser is dangerous, it's helpful to discuss the risks with the children, both to help them protect themselves and to validate their reality. However, even a violent, dangerous, abusive person is a human being, and children tend to be acutely tuned into the humanity of anybody that they know well. Don't talk about him as if he were a creature or a monster. You could say something like, your daddy has a problem that makes him sometimes unsafe, doesn't he? These terms would make sense to children. Those community members who work with the children of abused ladies in a professional capacity, such as teachers, therapists, police officers, or court employees can increase their effectiveness by being sensitive to the family dynamics that partner abuse creates and by remembering how manipulative the abuser person can be. Too many children of abused women are labeled ADD or ADHD and given medication instead of receiving the assistance that they really need. Thank you, Big Pharma. Children need us to take an interest in their predicament, help them to learn positive values, and support their crucial connection to their mothers. The next section is influencing your community's response to abuse. One-on-one approaches to overcoming abuse work good only when the wider community pulls together to create an environment in which the victims are supported and the abusive people are held accountable. You can play a role in making your community an abuse-free zone, a haven where abused ladies know that they can count on complete support, and where abusive people know they will not succeed in gaining sympathy for their excuses or in avoiding the consequences of their sickening actions. Here are just a few steps that you can take. You could offer to help your local program for the abused woman by being a volunteer, a fundraiser, speaker, or a board member. These programs are always needing help, and they're needing funds. Because the number of abused women needing assistance is so tragically high, many programs offer free or very low-cost training for volunteers. Get involved with an abuser program if there's one in your area. You can be trained to be a counselor for abusers or to be an advocate for abused women within the program. Use your influence to guide the program to keep improving the support it offers abused women and their children and the quality of education and counseling it gives the abusers. If no local programs are around you, contact one of the resources he lists in the back of his book. Join or start an organization devoted to education and activism regarding the abuse of women. Such groups give out literature, have protests, they promote more effective laws, they sponsor artistic projects related to domestic abuse, they take many other forms of courageous and creative action to end abuse. Your local programs for abused women may have a social action or a similarly named committee, but efforts to promote social change are sometimes more effective when they come out of a separate organization that's not trying to simultaneously provide many services. Bring programs into your school system that teach respect and equality for females, that make children aware of relationship abuse. Join your local domestic abuse task force or even start one yourself if there is not one in existence. An effective task force or a roundtable includes representatives from as many community institutions as possible that deal with families affected by abuse. Invite therapists, school personnel, clergy people, police, personnel from the district attorney's office, and court personnel, as well as staff from programs for abused women and for abusers. Such task forces have been multiplying rapidly over the past 10 years, with countless laudable accomplishments in coordinating services, launching new programs, and educating the public. Help to get services going in your area for children of abused women, especially counseling groups. Press the therapists who work with children to educate themselves on the issue of partner abuse and its effects on children who are exposed to it. Participate in public education efforts regarding the re-injuring of abused women and their children through custody and visitation litigation. Join educational efforts in secondary schools regarding abuse in teen dating relationships in order to stop abuse before it starts. Advocate for expanded welfare benefits and other forms of public economic support for abused women. The cuts in public assistance over the past decade have often made it much more difficult for abused women to leave their partners, especially if they have kids. Women can't leave abusive men if they are economically trapped. Protest television and print media portrayals that glorify abuse and sexual assault or that blame victims, including news coverage. Now good luck with that one. If you are a former abused woman who's no longer with the abusive person, consider revealing your story in public. There's a tremendous need for women who have had personal experience with abuse to go to social service agencies, schools, police departments, and other groups and help people to grasp more deeply what abuse actually looks like and what tremors it sends through so many lives. Bancroft says that he has seen professionals and other community members transformed by hearing the account of a real-life woman who's been with a psychological or a physical assaulting partner. Support women who are survivors of abuse to take leadership in your community and make sure they are represented on all task forces and policy-making bodies addressing domestic abuse.
I am the Narcopath. Remember me? I'm here to give you a few more confessions.
I was the one that broke your heart, wasn't I? Well, I'm here to tell you what went on behind the scenes. When we first started dating, you thought you were in heaven because I did anything and everything for you. I put you before me, or so it looked on the surface. I recall you went through my phone one night when I was indisposed, and you had the nerve to see a message come through from another guy. You acted all shook up about it and paranoid, and I just told you, oh, that's just a friend. I know he called me baby and sweetie, but that's just the way he talks to me. Get over it, I said. Evidently, it happened again, and that convinced you that I was up to no good. Even though I swore to you there's no way I could ever cheat on you. You're the only one for me, I'd say, and I thought you believed it. You made it clear you were through with me. You wouldn't answer my phone calls. I couldn't get in the door to your home. And I've told y'all before, nobody leaves the Narcopath. They don't do it. I decide when the leaving is going to happen. So, I knew where you went on the weekends. I knew your favorite nightclub. I drove by and sure enough, saw your car in the parking lot, so I had a treat for you. I had no other option, so when I went to the gym, I made sure I found the hottest stud I could find. And of course, it didn't take much to tempt him. I told him that he could touch my teeth. I offered him some money and said, would you do me a favor? And he agreed. And you remember that night, I'm sure. You were there with your football buddies just standing around. I know you were depressed because I was the best snatch you ever had. Still, you were convinced I was cheating and you had such strong values you would never be with someone who cheated. Even though I told you I never did, you'd never believed it. Well, I gave you what you deserved. When I walked in with the hottest guy in the world, gym buff body, skin-tight shirt, tiny little shorts with a huge thing showing in front, and I made sure to walk arm in arm right past you and ignored you as if I didn't even know you. That was to teach you a lesson. Nobody dumps the Narcopath. You got it? I knew that would get your attention. Do you remember what happened next? You started to send me messages after blocking me from doing that for you, saying how much you missed me, which is typical. They always do that. You were asking questions. Is that serious? That guy you're with, and it did everything I wanted it to. It got you wondering. I ignored your messages just for a few days, and finally responded, and I told you, oh, he doesn't mean anything to me. All I can think about is you. And you fell for that? You are so gullible. You deserve what happened next. All throughout our relationship before all this, you were suspicious about various things. Like when we'd go to the grocery store, the cashier used to say certain little things that indicated maybe he knew me better than just a patron at the store. I always told you, oh, he's just being silly. I don't know who that is. The other situation with my teacher, you were suspicious of, because I stayed in class for long hours when school was closed. I assured you, oh, you're just being paranoid again. And then the cousin I introduced you to, which you suspected wasn't really a cousin at all because you looked him up on some kind of website, you creep. I assured you, oh, well, it must be a misprint in the website. Yes, he is my cousin. All those things were lies. I played them all off and said they weren't. Do you recall the time I did my specialty just to get you broken down on your knees? Once you found out another piece of evidence against me from looking in my phone, even though I put a password on it, and you figured it out, stalker.
Like a real weirdo.
You happened to jot down the name of my professor, Professor Tompkins. You evidently saw one of his messages because I was absent the night before in class. and you saw something in the message that indicated something's going on. You were in tears, saying, "What's going on? Tell me." And so I let you have it. You deserved it. I told you, that guy at the grocery store and I have been doing it since before you and I met, and still continue to. I told you the teacher you read the message from, it talked about how beautiful my teeth were. Same thing. Actually, I started seeing him after you and I started dating. He has a really big swimming pool. And in the cousin, I revealed to you as well. He ain't no cousin. I found him on an online website, looking for sex. That had you on your knees in tears, and you deserved every bit of it. You tried to leave me. Told you, that ain't gonna happen. Nobody leaves the Narcopath.
Tamika told me that you asked her what I said about you. Don't bother asking people. I've already gotten to them first.
Not gonna tell you anything. You should never have turned against me, the Narcopath, because without me you're nothing. No one will ever have you in the shape that you're in. I'm the only one who would have loved you. But you blew that now, didn't you? Spying on me, checking up on what I'm doing. It's none of your business. You're getting what you deserve. You're not going to have me, and it's your loss.